for we'll get started with the workshop. The agenda's been circulated, and the first item is the recovery plan. So I'll throw over to you, Martin, and let you walk us through it. Anything you want to sort of add that's not in your document, or just clarify a few points as we go along?
Sure. Yeah, the recovery plan is got some comments back already where I've possibly interpreted them correctly. I've updated them. Otherwise, if I've got questions, I'll go through it. But a couple of clarifications. The recovery plan, as I put it in now, is talking about 12 months of activity. It may take us 18 months. It may take us 24 months. I don't know, because obviously a lot of it is to do with how often and how quickly we get things released. When relaxation of particular restrictions happen, or it could be that it's likely we may get small outbreaks and other impacts where we have to stop for a while again in the Barossa. But it's primarily just a 12-month activity, so it's not for the next 12 months. It may well be, because we may just keep going, which is great. There's a couple of fundamental policy statements, and my interpretation of some of our early conversations were where we were going to put our effort was in terms of recovery, was in terms of supporting the community, supporting the social, supporting the businesses, rather than waiving rates, rather than what we have done is obviously defer rates. The waiving of rates is fairly difficult in terms of the whole political conversation that's going on at the moment. Because it is our main revenue source. We don't have many other revenue sources, but if we have to model something else, we will. But if we do completely restrict our rate capacity, we won't have capacity to respond. We will have to start cutting. The way I structured the document really is in the concept of the National Emergency Risk Assessment Guidelines, where it talks about 5 particular areas. I know it's a little bit, to use Leonie's feedback to me, a little bit bureaucratic at the beginning, but I guess that's really just to set the framework. And I'm not saying we've still got to do some more detailed writing and just double check everything, but it really comes down to 5 areas, and that's people, economy, public admin, social, and environmental. So the first part there, it's not a risk assessment, it's really just a high level assessment. Many of the terms many of the definitions there are actually from the NERAG handbook. And clearly, in my view and my assessment, it's really the people and the social setting and the economy setting that we need to put most of our effort into. Talks about some of our key partners, and then we get into the nitty-gritty, which is really part 6. So part 6 is based on some of the feedback I've had, some of the conversations that I've had at different groups, to start to pull together what a recovery plan might look like within each particular area. I'm not going to go through it all. I'm going to do this by exception in a minute and provide me with comments. So just to round it out, the people area is really the sorts of responses are mainly internal, and some ideas around building confidence back in the community. The economy is obviously about rebuilding our economy, and the sorts of activities in that are obviously around trying to rebuild our business, our brand, particular types of strategies around when we can attract people to our region. And timing of all this is got to be worked on. There's obviously the areas of the big project. There's also the acceleration programs that we've already outlined in previous meetings, and part 7 talks about some further support for our business-to-business network. And I think another one that I popped in there, I can't remember if it was in my first draft, but some feedback is that the Vintage Festival's quite rightly going to struggle to get any support this year, so it may need some underwriting. Public administration is obviously where there are things that have impacted our ability to provide services. That the reality is we've done pretty well in terms of using this tool that we've got here and other mechanisms that we put in place pretty quick. I think the really interesting thing is it might change some of the way we go about working in the future. That's not going to happen in 10 minutes, but certainly an opportunity to see how we can do things more efficiently as well. Not everyone necessarily has to sit at a desk. Social, so that's the other major part of the program. So economic and social is the major parts. One is a program. We may be able to get Star Club and other sorts of funding partners in this one as well. That's about helping rebuild the community, the sporting clubs, the rec pubs, and you know the RSLs, the whatever needs some support out there to re-establish over the next couple of years, and some additional money in the grants, and you know, anything from like small events to larger events to just bring community together. Very similar. We were talking before. If you got online, it's actually quite common recovery tool for things like bushfires, where you just get communities together. Oh, there's a typo. And environmental. In fact, there's not a lot in environmental. I guess we could have a debate, but probably the one thing that has benefited out of this in many ways is the environment. But there's a couple of programs there that we can consider about ramping up and supporting some additional work, but that can be done from internal. The next component is really the activity to date around grants. It's not, that'll be a moving beast. And then finally, looking at a governance framework and then just outlining a summary, setting it up for, obviously when I put this to a council meeting, is endorsing the document, which will be in terms of the summary as well. The pathway I'm sort of thinking from here is obviously to get all your inputs today. I'd like to be able to release it to partners that, such as the Barossa leadership group and the industry groups, who can have some input into it, and then hopefully get a report to early June for some form of endorsement. And that whole idea is that we're most likely to be having a council special meeting early in June anyhow to pass the budget to go out to consultation. So that's all I really wanted to say, Mayor. So I will open myself a document and jot down any further comments. Unmute yourself, Ben. You've got to unmute yourself.
I haven't got a mouse at the moment. Here we are. I'm back. Look, thanks for that, Martin. There's one there that you had highlighted, age-friendly SA grants with the Faye Fuller Foundation. But we'll leave that one until. Has anybody got any particular questions or clarifications in regard to what Martin's just run through with those various aspects of the targeted grants and all the policy and the environmental things? It's sort of comprehensive, but as you said, it's sort of probably change as we go along, and we'll keep updating as things pan out and as we become aware of different grant applications, which the Stockwell one was one that we recently had announced. So with that, is there anyone that particularly wants some further clarification and drill down in any way?
So Councillor Johnson's got our attention.
Can I go ahead?
Yep, go for
it. Yeah. Look, the only thing I'm just sort of interested in, Martin, is what's the relationship between the sort of things that are planned in this document by council and to some extent the region and the Barossa leadership group, and what are the governance arrangements for that leadership group, and are we confident that that's the best way forward, please?
Yeah, look, the Barossa Leadership Group is really just a group of industry and the two councils and the RDA together. It's only a collaborative group. It doesn't have any formal setting. It's just a good way for the people to get in a room to have a conversation, and certainly some of the ideas that come from this come from those conversations. We've been really, really clear that no matter what happens here, we don't want to duplicate. So you'll see some of those programs I'm saying would be delivered potentially by BGWA or Tourism Barossa, because, you know, let's not get into the game of us then duplicating marketing out to the world. That's not our skill. The governance structure internally, however, would continue to be managed by council and supported by us. And we would put some form of arrangements in between any of the groups that we're saying we would you know, provide $35,000 for an initial tranche of intrastate marketing. It might be, you know, you need to tell us what you've done, sort of thing, and, you know, give us some deliverables. We've still got to acquit this money, but we don't want to make it overly restrictive as well. And same with some of those grant programs, they're ideas, but we need to still put a little bit of policy around them. But one thing I'm really careful of also is not making them too restrictive, too administratively heavy, and that they're flexible. The one thing I think we absolutely have to do in this is we've got to be flexible, because recovery can take 2, 3, 5 years. So, you know, we've just got to, whatever we create, we've got to create a flexibility around it, in my view. In relation to that grant program, that is one I plugged in late, and I just haven't caught up with Joe to get the words from her yet. Leonie was next.
Thanks, Martin. I think the plan's fantastic. The, you know, initiatives are great, particularly obviously in the economic part. So part of my question was going to be around timing, and you know, I know the June meeting may not be that far away, but just in terms of, do we need to be able to have, you know, the ability to move forward quicker than that for some of the initiatives? And I'm thinking of the tourism one. We had a tourism board, Barossa board meeting this afternoon, and also to your point around flexibility, that one's a good example where we need to have some tweaking potentially of that, and happy to talk offline on that in terms of the phase 1, 2, 3, because phase 3 will not be, you'd imagine, you know, in this calendar year. No. Potentially not even until second half of next year. And in terms of that being a partnership as well with Light Council, have had some discussion on this one as well. So basically, in terms of the cocktail of funds, it needs to be, you know, if we can have some flexibility in there, that would be great. So I'm presuming this is going to be, in terms of, this is has to be a living, breathing document that can evolve, and part of that will be managing expectations of the community as well, in terms of us making a commitment to do a whole bunch of things, but having to have that flexibility in there to make it be the best program it can be, because obviously things are changing so fast. If we can have it built into the approval that we give somehow, to basically have some discretion for yourself as CEO and, you know, Mayor, if, you know, in terms of actually being able to change as we need to.
So I guess a really good example is when we were heavily involved in the Eden Valley fires with Mid-Murray, and that would have gone through, at a guess, 6 to 7 different iterations of the recovery plan. It just kept building, changing, adapting. But I'll take on form I mean, it depends what level of feedback we get today. I mean, if it's not extensive, I can get the report back to council very quickly, and we can do a quick special meeting on Tuesday next week to endorse it. Just remember, I'm balancing a budget as well. So the ability for me to have some flexibility is great, but I think we need to still work through that governance committee to make sure that there's a level of oversight. Next,
David.
Sorry.
Yeah, David, you're next, and then John.
Okay, I suspect that a lot of what I want to say will probably be in the next segment, so I'll just limit it, key points to this one. I've already spoken to Martin about this. I know it's a 12-month plan, which is going to be rolling. I think that as a council, we probably should be factoring in that this is going to be at least 18 months to 2 years. I've been doing a lot of research in the last couple of days, and I've been ringing around a lot of people who are sort of quote unquote in the know. There is no way that they reckon a vaccine can be developed in less than 18 months' time with all the proper safeguards, even though they want to rush it through. There's apparently about 100 different attempts at it being created at the moment in different parts of the world. But what they've identified is that this particular type of virus has never yet had a vaccine successfully created. So we are in really uncharted territory. So I think that we need to be thinking about that this will probably run the life of this council for sure. I think it's certainly going to be the end of 2021 before we see a vaccine at the very earliest, and maybe beyond that. And I think we've only been in sort of really being disadvantaged, if you like, by the coronavirus for the last 6 weeks. I shudder to think how we'll be in 6 months and then in 18 months. So there's going to be a lot of social issues that I think we're going to need to deal with, which I think we'll talk about in the next section. With that in mind, I agree with Leonie. I think flexibility is key. I think we should be very, very cautious about locking ourselves in terms of waiving rates, freezing rates, all of those sorts of things. I'm not suggesting we don't have the discussions, but I think we need to take our time about it, because what we do this year will have knock-on effects for next year and the years that follow. And I generally believe we need to start thinking that what the state that we're in right now is possibly going to be the new normal. I've had this conversation with Bim as well. It would not surprise me in the slightest if we find ourselves going in and out of these, let's call them lockdowns for the time being, these tight social isolation periods. And we might go through that 3 or 4 times in the next 2 years or more. And I think we need to be incredibly flexible so that we can switch from being in and being out, in much the same way that countries like Vietnam and Taiwan have been very effective at putting the foot on when they need to and then easing it back when they need to as well. So I do think flexibility is key, and most of the rest that I want to talk about I'll probably say for the next segment, which is really to do with the social issues and how this will affect the youth and so on. Thank you.
Thanks, David. John, you want to jump in?
Thanks, Bim. Yes. Just remembering the headline of the Leader last week was something about $600 million being spent across the council boundaries. And I see we have made reference to a Commonwealth infrastructure report, a support for $1 billion. Now, is that Australia-wide or South Australia-wide? I did think the Light Regional Council's claim of 600 million was pretty out there. So a bit of clarification if there is any, please.
I can't comment on the logic of the $600 million from the Light Regional Council because the documentation is limited. The infrastructure fund is just ones that we believe we may have an opportunity to get funding from. And yes, when it was originally announced, which pretty much right back at the beginning of late March, and no significant details came about this, it may be actually directed at industry. We don't know the answer yet. It's just been announced as a fund. Is Australia wide? Absolutely.
Anybody else want any further points of clarification, or are you generally okay with it all?
So I guess we were talking about the whole plan. Is there any other bits on the whole plan? Leonie, Bim.
Okay, sorry. Yep, I was looking away. Yes, Leonie.
So the only other thing I was going to say, and this is based on other conversations that I've had this week in terms of, again, it's more of a principle than on any one point in the document. And that's where I would love to see us be able to have some in principle sort of parts to this as well to give us some flexibility. So because the impact is not one size fits all, and obviously even within tourism and hospitality, there are some businesses that are absolutely booming through this, is to be able to actually be the same way I think that both federal and state government are going to have to do now is be quite a lot more targeted. So rather than sort of blanket rules, is that we do actually consider some either subsector specific or business specific initiatives and have that flexibility, because there are people who have received the PAYG cash flow funding who it's just a bonus, they didn't actually need it, and there are people that I think that are going to be really suffering for a lot longer, particularly in tourism and hospitality, that are just unable to open, and we need to have them open. And the other thing as well, again, to Dave's point, it is more of a community thing, that beyond the economy, if we don't have pubs and cafes and our main street businesses open, the actual vitality of those townships is going to be impacted. And so we need to be able to be quite nimble in terms of the assistance that we can give, whether that's in financial or just access to advice, to be able to be really, like I said, really, really nimble and flexible during the next few months, because the community is going to need us to do that.
Noted.
Yeah, no, David, you've said all good, so I assume you're okay with the content. And Russell, you want to come in, Russell?
Yeah, just a question for Martin, please. Martin, there's a column with funding with a whole bunch of numbers in it. Will you be able to dissect that out from a practical point of view and make sure we understand, whether that's internal or external, and how, maybe a bit more analysis on that when we come to discuss the budgetary support for this, please?
Everything you see there is internal.
Okay, thanks.
And we have modelled it. So, look, everybody understands we're going to have to run a few years of deficits, but I'm comfortable enough that it's doable. And absolutely, I get the flexibility, and I think the whole idea of some in principles. And if we get this through, then I'll quickly throw together policy documents around some of the programs.
Yeah, Kathy Schilling.
Hello. Yes, I just want to endorse it. I think it's a good starting point. As you said, it's an evolving document, and everything is evolving, and we're going day by day. So I think it's a good starting point for what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Any other comments that anyone wants to make? If not, we can sort of bring that back to council. Hang on. Yep, Kathy agrees. Kathy Troop.
Okay, so I'll take that on board, write a few bits and pieces around flexibility, etc., etc. And yeah, I can probably get that back to council next week.
All right, very good. So that'll be an additional item for Tuesday's meeting.
Well, it'll have to be set up as a special meeting. A
special meeting, yeah. Yep, okay. All right. Thank you. Yep, thanks, Carla. Yep, all right, then the next item we've got is the community plan. So if you want to open that one up, and Martin, you got some comments and clarifications on that one as well?
Look, this is pretty, really what this is, sorry, I'm just going to bring my right file up. The purpose of this one is really just to test the report that came back from MAS, because we've actually already started writing the reviews on those reports, and basically to turn it over to you as to any further feedback you want to provide. I will sort of outline what we're trying to achieve. This is a review, it's not a full rewrite. So what we've done is we've taken, as an initial step, and it's working quite well, we've taken all that data and information that MAS has presented back to us, and we're revising the community plan and corporate plan to blend them together, and then we've done a mapping tool to start to make sure that it all hangs together. So really what we need to do at this point in time is just make sure that the report from MAS adequately covers the conversations and the direction that council's happy with, then we'll continue on with the conversion into the community and corporate plans. It's all I really need to say, and I'll just take notes on changes or additions.
Yeah, I guess my read of it was sort of from page 9 on, where we sort of break down the different aspects of the community plan. I was interested with the cube-like icon, but that's fine. Anybody got anything? Do you think it covers all of the points that we sort of raised with Maz? And it's got, yeah. I'll throw it over. Here we are. Where was I up to? Yes, Russell. That's where I'm up. Oh, yeah, come in, Russell.
Martin, well done. Congratulations. Thank you very much. It looks great. And, some of it I'd contest, but there's so much good stuff in it. Why bother?
Thanks. David?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, look, I don't want to sort of change anything in what's there now, but there's a few things that I am concerned that we need to keep at the forefront of our mind when it comes to the community at large. Again, this is coming from the premise that this could be 2 years or more, or this could become the new normal in the way that we end up living our lives. I'm particularly concerned about the youth, particularly youth from, when I say youth, people in the ages of 20 to 30. These are, I think, the members of our community are going to be hit the hardest by what's happening. First off, I don't know about what you guys remember of your 20s. It was a reasonably sexually active period in my life, and I suspect I wasn't alone in that. And when you're young and attractive and you are out there amongst others of similar interests, being told, oh, by the way, you have to basically go into social isolation, don't touch anybody and don't be young, I think that's going to be very tough. Frankly, I think people will start to ignore it. And that's going to be a concern. The other thing is these are people who don't feel the fear in quite the same way that the more elderly of us do, because they're unlikely to be in the firing line, and most of them will probably survive this pretty well. So they're doing a lot of heavy lifting on behalf of their elders. And yet they probably are being hit the hardest economically in terms of the types of jobs that are being lost are the ones that are basically being done by the youth. I actually think pub culture possibly might disappear from Australia. I really am that bleak about it. Speaking to Jack Ferret this morning, yesterday, he was suggesting that there won't be anybody walking into the front bar, sitting down and having a beer. If you show up, you'll have to drink with the people you came with. That's a very different environment to the way a lot of guys enjoy going to the pub. I don't see how football is going to play out with social distancing. I think pubs and football and social distancing, those things just will not sit side by side, not just in the playing, but in the spectating. A lot of people, a lot of males certainly in the Barossa, but a lot of females too, go along on Saturday. And this is one of the ways in which we don't just socialise with our townships, but we interact with the other townships in the Barossa. And it's one of the great bonding moments of the Barossa, Saturday afternoons when the various towns get together. You get that healthy rivalry, but you also get that community happening. And I just don't see how that is not going to just disappear if we maintain social distancing. I'm curious to see how the state government and the federal governments ultimately resolve this. But I think we need to be very aware of that this could be the new normal, and that's going to very much change the way people interact. And I am very concerned about how that can then turn to such things as drugs and alcohol abuse. If hanging out with your mates is as illegal as smoking a joint or sniffing some powder, you might find that drug use suddenly becomes less of a concern than people have. If pubs disappear or they effectively disappear, anytime we introduce prohibition into any society, you find that people will then find a way around it. And so the equivalent of a speakeasy, I think, is going to be something that we could find springing up, that people will start to hang out privately. The social distancing will be undermined by that as well. And I'm also very concerned about, we've been going 6 weeks, but if we're going 6 months or more and people don't have jobs, people are getting deeper and deeper into debt in terms of their rental and so forth. I can see suicide kicking in. Domestic violence, I understand, is up at the moment. I think that's only going to get bleaker and bleaker. And I think we're going to see desperation, depression, anger, and then the increasing denial of what's going on occurring within our community. And the social elements of this are very, very concerning. I heard this morning that the task force that is playing out at the federal level has actually now introduced, as well as the doctors, a mental health specialist. This was I haven't actually read this. I've just heard about it. I hope that is true, because I think the mental health issues are only going to progress as they go along. And I think that is definitely an area where we are going to have to exert a lot of support for the community. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Leonie.
I guess just to Dave's point, and I don't think, this is all comes down to personal view. I don't think it's going to, Dave just painted a very bleak picture. Hopefully that's the worst case scenario. But data can also help this sort of stuff in terms of, so one of the, the risks people are talking about at the moment is the dependency that people may have developed already on JobSeeker and JobKeeper, and the federal government's ability to continue to provide that level of assistance, and what that might do when that comes off. So, there's data that I believe that can be sourced in terms of what percentage of our population in our LGA are actually, accessing those services, so that we can be a bit forearmed. But also the Barossa Cares group, that is an amazing initiative. I'm super proud of the people who've been involved with that. They're the group that will be able to again provide anecdotal feedback on what they're hearing, what is going on. But I think it's up to us to work really well together with both levels of government and our neighbours and our community groups to actually make sure that the things that they've just described don't happen, because our communities have been through hard stuff before. There is a decent cohort who've never been through a recession. They've never had to deal with this sort of stuff. And I agree with Dave in terms of youth being a huge problem, that it's not easy. It's not going to be easy to get a job in the normal sectors that you would get a job in if you're a young person who's unskilled, potentially uneducated, and looking for that part-time labour. But I think we need to use the resources that we have, and that's both, the groups and human beings who are talking to people all the time in those spheres, and also get some decent data so we know what we're actually up against.
So thanks, Leonie. I'm just sorry to butt in. I actually have the first set of data today, so I might wrap that up, and it's only economic data at this stage, so I might wrap that up in a quick email out to everybody if they're interested.
David Havik.
Thank you very much. I agree with what David said. I think the young generation will affect this in the long term, and I think that violence and mental health issues will be on the top of the list there. So I think we need to be aware of that. I don't want to go on too much about it. I think enough has been said. But I must say, Martin, thanks very much for the work you've done so far. There's a lot of work being put into the reports, and I think it's up front and go down the right track.
Just remember, Maz did most of the work. I only just had to read it.
Martin, just in the context of this being a community plan, and I think some of these discussions we had back with Maz was before Corona. Is that right?
Yeah, they were, correct.
So is there anything specifically we need to sort of add into this? I think there's a couple have touched on it there. I'm just sort of looking at the previous document and this one and seeing where there's some crossover or.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing.
Plan. Yeah,
I think what I'm hearing is some form of integration of. I think what a lot of the stuff we're talking about, the recovery plan, you would actually embed in the corporate plan, because that's the 4-year plan where we do stuff.
Yeah.
At the top level, we'll probably have some. What we do, we have some statements around social and mental well-being, etc., etc. But we'll review those in the context of these notes.
No, very good. Anything further that anyone wants to make with regard to this item? Don, sorry, hang on, there's a couple here. Now let me go back and just see. David, you're happy? Gary.
Yep, thanks, Ben. Just in terms of the mental health and social isolation stuff, I think it's also important the fact that we are currently reviewing the regional public health plan, and I think that review will focus a lot on pandemic as part of that review process and how we respond going forward. So I think that whole mental health, social interaction is going to be a major factor in that review. So linking that to the community plan as well.
Thanks, Gary. Don.
Thank you. I'm like most other people. I'm only more than happy with what's been presented in front of us. Really like Barossa Cares. I'm very much concerned about mental health, and just give some local perspective. There's 2 local pubs in Mount Pleasant. One of them lease not renewed, end of the middle of this month, so we're back down to 1 hotel unless someone wants to take on one of the other hotels. So it's already starting to have an impact. And thanks very much, Gary, on your input in relation to the regional public health plan. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Okay. Any further comments on this item? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Grapevine invitation and sister city proposal. You want to sort of lead with that again?
Yeah, I guess this is a bit of a recap and an update. Now, some will be aware of Grapevine and what has come as a result of some past interactions going way back with some vignerons and winemakers visiting Grapevine some years ago, and the executive officer came over and saw us last year, and we showed him around a little bit, and obviously with many other people as well, and they are looking for a sister city proposal in Australia. They like the Barossa. It sits very nicely with the state's strategy around their partnership with Texas, Houston, and setting up a trade facility there. The Grapevine area is only a short distance from about 8.5 million people and from the Dallas airport. Prior to COVID hitting, we were just starting to have conversations around what a sister city proposal would look like, and they had invited the Barossa to come and show at their main show, which I think from memory is September. Somebody can correct me if I got that date wrong. And had invited the mayor to go over as well. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but I just wanted to really give you an update because I had promised to give an update some time ago, and the correspondence that I gave you shows that we'll pick it up again with COVID-19 recommences and see where it can go. It's quite a strong relationship with BGWA as well, and some of the local vignerons and winemakers, and they have some really interesting correlations with our visions around history and the community feel and the culture and the heritage components, although they don't have many vineyards anymore. So that's all I really wanted to say. If anybody's got any particular questions.
David, you've sort of put an attention there. Do you want to add something further other than yes, September?
Yeah, I'm big fan of this relationship. I think we should pursue it as hard as we can. Yes, Barossa Grape and Wine are very keen on it. I'm sure Leonie will have plenty to say because Stewie Bourne has been there and he's sung nothing but its highest praises. We've spoken to members of Grapevine on the radio. This, I think, is a relationship that is well worth pursuing for a lot of reasons. Once again, state government has a close relationship with Texas. It's an area where the local wine industry is moving in. I think we're the feature wine region this year, and we were 3 years ago. So they see us as a very important part of their connection. And Grapevine is they generate the vast majority of their revenue from tourism. And as Martin said, they actually don't grow their own grapes per se or make their own wine per se, but they are a very strong wine culture area. The one thing that they're missing is a wine brand or a wine region that they can actually drink the wine of, and the Barossa just slots very nicely, and it's a marriage that I think would work incredibly well, and I think we should pursue this as rigorously as we can.
Thanks, David. Carla.
Yeah, just quickly to agree with much of what Dave just said there. I think this is a really important opportunity that, you know, especially in the post-COVID recovery period, is going to be really important for us. I think the US market in particular offers us some, you know, immense untapped opportunities both across the wine and tourism industries for both grapevine and the Barossa. So as soon as we can do something with this, I think we should be jumping onto it.
Thanks, Carla. Leonie, and then John.
Yeah, so it's basically to, again, you know, agree with David and Carla's comments. And obviously, you know, given that my partner is a winemaker that was went over there during Grape Fest a couple of years ago, he had, you know, I obviously do have a bit more background in terms of the benefits. But one of the things I think is obviously going to be so important in the next 12 months is setting ourselves apart from any other region. The whole entire country is going to be competing now for the same tourism market, and trying to re-establish, you know, wine markets and until all the markets open up again fully. And I think the more advantages we can have, the better, and this would give us a huge one. So my mate chatted earlier to Bim talking about the, you know, I would love us to see us starting talking to them now during COVID, in terms of, you know, even if it's just a Zoom meeting, you know, to basically just keep the relationship building. And then when Bim can travel, that, you know, we support him to do that. But I would also love to see John Durden, who's the Tourism Barossa chair person, also, you know, if we were able to put some funding towards him going as well, because I think if Tourism Barossa can be leading development of festivals and events that drive visitation and spend for our region and give us those unique points of difference in the market, now is more than ever the time to do that. And obviously backing onto that would be the potential for wine sales and winemakers, you know, to have an exchange and whatnot. So I think it's full of huge promise. And yeah, I just rather, because to Dave's point earlier, you know, there's some version of living in a COVID world could go for 1 or 2 years. I would hate to see us put this on hold for 12 months, waiting for international travel to open up again, because there's a lot we can actually do. We've proven recently we can live a fair bit of our lives via Zoom or Teams, and you know, it'd be great to get that started, basically.
Thanks, Leonie. John.
Thanks, Bim. It seems like it's grapevine by name, but not by nature. I don't disagree with what people have been saying, but I was just picking up on Martin's comment that they don't have many grapevines. Maybe I should Google grapevine Texas and just see what it's all about, because I have to say, when I saw this item, I was a little lukewarm, to say, and that's probably praising it up. But I'm really happy to, if it's a worthwhile thing, I'm more than happy to support it. I know we had sister city relationships with places in Japan. It was a little bit tokenistic. I think, Dave, you would agree that the language barrier for a start was difficult, but this is not the case in this instance. So, no, I'm happy to support it, but I was just sort of thinking, when Martin said they don't have any grapevines, I'm thinking, where's the synergy?
Yeah, I think the thing that come out through John on that point was the fact is that they didn't have any protection back then. They ripped vines out, and they were very impressed with how the Barossa's gone about protecting our industry and the valley. And so they seen there was some great lessons that they would have loved to have seen those, our stuff demonstrated to them before all their vines were pulled away out. Okay,
and that just makes me even stronger in my resolve that what we did, you know, back in the late 80s, and what we have carried on with is certainly the right way to go. And you know, I won't waver from that position I don't think it need to be a damn good reason. So, okay, that's fine. Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, no, look, and I guess there was a fair bit of interest from, I think it was Minister Ridgway at that time was the tourism minister. He was rather impressed, and the synergies that are there with our state and our state government with the space technology and some of the space technologies going on in Texas as well. So there seems to be a lot of opportunities that even the state might get on board with, just with some of the brief discussions that we had at that day when the representative from Grapevine was up here touring around. It was just timely as far as that was concerned. All right. Anyone else? Any other comments?
Dave.
Yep. Sorry.
As we were talking, I just remembered. I can't remember the name of the town, but but Lyndoch actually has a sister city relationship with a town in Texas.
Yeah.
So there's already. Do you know the name of it, Ben?
Austin, for memory.
No, that's Austin's Adelaide sister city.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
It starts with a G, I think. It's not Galveston. I wish it was, but yeah, I seem to remember there is a town in Texas which actually has a sister city relationship with Lyndoch, and it may even predate the Barossa Council formation.
Yes. That's right. I do remember there was something, but I thought it was Austin, but I could be amiss. Leone. Yes, most definitely, because now we've got the Premier and he's the Minister for Tourism. Yes, ideal. All right, we'll pursue that sister city discussion then. And Martin, is that something we need to formally take to council, or we'll just...
No. Well, we will at Sunday. What we'll do is we'll set up a meeting with him in the next week or two.
All right, lovely. Okay, I've got to look to my other computer and find out what was next on the agenda. I think it was budget.
Yeah, it's just a quick budget update. Won't even take 5 minutes. So we're very, very close. The operating's been done. We'll sign off on the draft capital and have it ready to go. So really we obviously need to have another workshop. So this was really canvassing. Are we happy to do it after council meeting, or would you like me to set up another meeting in the evening next Wednesday?
Any thoughts?
Well, I'll give you my thoughts. Is I think you're going to find council meeting pretty heavy going, and this is the first time we've done an electronic meeting, and we're now going to slam in a special meeting for the recovery plan. So, I mean, I'm thinking probably normal time Wednesday next week at 6:30. Yep,
I think that sounds good. And I was going to say Georgetown after that too. Thanks. Yeah, I was. You're right. It was Georgetown. Thanks, Joe. Georgetown. Yep, Leone. Thank you. So we're all happy with Wednesday for
I'll just
workshop on the budget.
Yeah, I'll just confirm it with Mark over the next couple of days, and then we'll see if we'll get our best to get the documents out to you. Okay, and I got one other quick one while I'm at it. I did book a mock meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock, but the general gist the other day was people were pretty comfortable. I don't want to go setting up a mock meeting if people don't want to go and do it.
So, yeah, John.
Thanks, Ben. Hand wave is just as good as ATT.
Well, it was in this case because you were on the screen.
Yeah, so I agree with Martin. I think we are coping with this in a workshop situation, and I don't anticipate a council situation will be vastly different. It is going to take a little longer. So I think I have another commitment tomorrow night if I'm not doing a mock meeting. So I'm really happy to meet next Tuesday, and then a workshop on the Wednesday if that's what was the planned itinerary.
Yep,
it is at this stage.
All right. Well, we'll stay with that plan. council meeting, special meeting on Tuesday, council meeting, and then of course Wednesday night workshop at 6:30. Okay, I think that's the agenda done. Well done. Well done. All went really good.
All right. Thanks all.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Nothing further. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.
See you
Thank you.
Tuesday. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.